Hello and welcome to this session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends where you are. And welcome to the introduction to the OpenNebula operations. So please drop a message in the chat with like exclamation mark, at symbol, or maybe any number if you can hear me well, if you can see my screen, so we can kick in this session. Well, nobody is posting anything. So yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks for confirming that. Thanks, Coyote. Okay, so let's begin. Now, what is the agenda for today? And I'm terribly sorry for the background noises. I have So today in our agenda is Sunstone. So we are going to discuss the graphical web user interface called Sunstone. We are going to go through some of the settings, the user settings, right? So we are going to talk about the virtual networks. What are the virtual networks that are supported? We are going to touch the marketplace and apps. Again, we discuss what it is and how to use it. We are going to discuss virtual machine templates. And in the end of the day, we are going to deploy virtual machines. So that is the plan for today. Please don't hesitate to drop any comments in this section. So if you have any questions regarding the material that's covered, and also should you know this session is being recorded, so you will be able to watch this recording once again. So let's kick in. Now, what the Sunstone is, right? So we often in our documentation we are always referring to an entity called Sunstone. So what it is, it's the graphical user interface, and if it's not proxied, then typically it listens on a port 2616 TCP. You may find in the documentation different references to Soundstone. And if you are going to look at the older documentation, you will find that there is the older version of a Sunstone. So currently, we do have this one available as well as the for the backward compatibility. But the one that we initially recommend to use is the one that listens on 2616 TCP. So, and this what we call the newer Sunstone. And it looks the following way. So once you log in, it looks quite modern. It has some shortcuts that you can quickly leverage to access different places without going through the menu. Now, it has the built-in one-time password or passcode MFA, so you can enroll that. You just need, your phone and uh, Google Authenticator, Bitward, and LastPass. You name it, just something that can scan the QR code and generate the code for you. And currently, it's the same for administrators and cloud users. So no matter who you are, your entry point is the same. You just enter your username and password, and based on the group settings, you either presented with a very, let's say, simplified view and limited access sections, or you will have the full access as the top tier administrator. So in this demonstration, in this webinar, we are going to use one admin user, and one admin user is the top tier administrator, right? So one admin user has full access to the system. One admin user cannot be limited. and one admin user is the part of one admin group, and whoever becomes a member of that group becomes the powerful user with no limits. So be very careful who is going to be a part of that group. Right. So once you log in, as I said, as one admin, use your password and you're in. Now, as any user, you can configure your custom settings, right? But as I said, as one admin, you can configure literally everything. You can configure your settings, you can configure groups, you can access all, aspects of the OpenNebula. Now, the view is going to differ, and that's what I mentioned before. That depends on the specific group settings. You either going to have a limited access to various menus of OpenNebula, or you're going to have the full access. So this can be switched as one admin. You have ability to switch through all of the views, and you can start with the cloud view, which is the most limited view, then go to user, then go to group admin, and then go to admin. So let's say that is the cloud view. So you have access to virtual machines, services, virtual machine templates, applications under the storage system, and your personal settings. So that is as much as you can open in that cloud view. This is the most simplistic one and intended for just regular cloud users. Then you can go to the user's view and you can see that you already have a bit more capabilities. Then there is a dedicated group admin view. So group admin would be, let's say, the team lead or manager of certain number of persons. And this one is a one step more powerful than the user and the cloud user. So thus has more options available. And in the end of the day, you go back to to admin view, and admin view covers them all. So you cannot be limited, and you pretty much can access everything. Now, these are predefined views. We are shipping OpenNebula with these 4 views. However, you can create your own views if you need to. For that, I would really refer you to the documentation, because there you can find which actions you need to take in order to build your own view. And that's not going to be the GUI task, so you will need to tinker a little bit of command line and adjust some of the files. But yeah, it's doable. And again, it's not a rocket science, so that's pretty much easy to achieve. Okay, great. So in this demonstration, I'm going to use the admin view, so I have access to every function of OpenNebula. Right. Then we have settings. So settings is quite an interesting thing. So first of all, settings are unique to every user. So a user can configure its own settings on its own. And then what you can find there is the secure shell key. You can switch uh, the theme from being dark mode to go to the bright mode. Then that's where you enroll the MFA, and that's where you can also create some custom labels. So you go to settings, and that's where you can configure that, as well as you can set the default endpoint, right? So if you are in the multi-zone OpenNebula with federated functionality, then you can set a different endpoint. You can set a default view. So if your user has multiple views, for example, cloud and the user view, or group admin and the user view, or any other custom view, then that's where you can set which one, though, is going to be the default one. Then you can set a different language if you wish, and of course the schema. So goes to dark if you prefer the dark settings, or go to light if you prefer the light settings, or just can go with system, then whatever your current system is configured, that would be the color schema. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to proceed with the light mode, so it's a lot easier to look at. Then your custom labels, so you can tag your resources with these labels. For example, you can add prod, you can add dev right here, and you can go and tag templates. You can tag virtual machines with these custom labels. And as I mentioned, the secure shell public key. So the secure shell public key is quite important. When you deploy a virtual machine, then by default, the secure shell public key of a user who had deployed this virtual machine will be added to the authorized keys. So you can, from your computer or whatever you have this secure shell public private key, you can connect to that virtual machine without any passwords or whatever. So in order to achieve that, you need to paste it right here to the secure shell public key field. Now, if you install it from Mini One, as I did for this specific demonstration, then by default it takes the one admin's system user that is configured on the server itself. Is going to take this public key and adds it to my user, so I can connect to my virtual machines using the same environment that I used to deploy this OpenNebula. But again, it may work for this demonstration, but obviously it doesn't work for your case, because when you install it, not for demo and play purposes, but for more or less production, then you typically don't connect to your virtual machines from the OpenNebula front end, right? So you connect from your laptop or some Bastion host or whatever your case may be. So then the public key supposed to be placed right here, and then you can enjoy this enrollment. But be sure if you are not enrolling any public key right here, there's still an option how you can add this public key to your virtual machine, so you can connect even after the deployment. So although it's good to have, but in case you forgot or in case you've changed your public key, you always can edit this this, let's say, field or this option later once the virtual machine deployed. And of course, the number of rows per page. So again, depends on your resolution and how much zoom you're using. You may benefit from having more rows on the same page. So let's say 10 instead of having the default 5. The two-factor authentication, that is the place. So you can register your MFA and enjoy all of the MFA benefits. And again, that's a nice thing to do because it's built in, so you don't need to install any additional packages. So it's already shipped with the default installation of OpenNebula. Good. Now, the purpose of all your virtual machines is to get connected somehow to them, right? So you may need to connect to these virtual machines to do some work, or these virtual machines needs to serve some of the application to you. That would be impossible without virtual networks or without properly configured networking. Now, OpenNebula supports multiple virtual network standards. It supports bridge and bridge with security groups. It supports the OVS, so Open vSwitch implementation, either Open vSwitch or Open vSwitch with VXLAN. It supports VXLAN in two modes, the multicast and EVPN mode, and it also supports the good old-fashioned .1q, also known as VLANs. So these are the standards that we support, and you can select the virtual network type when you are creating the virtual network. But there is many more, right? So aside from just having these virtual network types, we also have different functionality like network templating, network reservations. So for example, you can take the whole network, take a chunk of it, and make it as a separate network. Or you may enable the user's self-service functionality, so users could create their own networks with predefined settings as you define them. For example, the address space, the network type, in case of, let's say, a VLAN, the VLAN ID, and these kind of stuff. So all that can be pre-configured, formed as a template, and what users need to do is just click next, finish, and get this virtual network created for them. So all the networks are configured under the network section. So you go to virtual networks, and that's where you have a list of your virtual networks. Should you install it from Mini1, then by default, you have the default virtual network with the tag of FW. So FW will stand for the firewall, which actually means that it's a bridge with security groups. So security groups, treat them as the host level firewall. So you don't need to configure any firewall on your virtual machine. You can benefit from having the host level firewall. Now, this host level firewall is supported by .1q, VXLAN, and bridge with security groups. So these three network types support that. So to indicate that this virtual network is not a simple bridge, but bridge with security groups, we have this label here called FW. So that stands for the firewall. If you click plus, then you would need to you go to the virtual network creation menu. Now you need to name it somehow. So I will name it as VNet1, and then the cluster. So OpenNebula supports clusterization, so you could have your homogeneous resources separated from the others. And by default, we have default cluster. And if you haven't configured anything and you keep the default cluster, then all of your resources are going to be assigned to that default cluster. So that's where you can select it should you have more, or you can leave it empty and then it will go by default to that default cluster. Then under on the configuration section, that's where you set what is the type of the virtual network it is. Now, in case of bridge and security group, you can benefit from the private host networking. So that means that the traffic is not intended to go outside and it stays on the same host. If you switch this button, then you could see that a tiny field just disappeared. Why? Because if you're planning for this traffic of this virtual network to go outside of that host, then you need to specify the physical device. For example, ATH0. So, ATH0, right? But if you are not planning to do anything of that and you switch it off, then you don't need to specify it. Now, this is the mandatory part of the network configuration. So it must be attached to physical device, to a physical port. Then you cannot proceed without placing the correct name of your physical device. And this is why I also mentioned that the cluster is the set of homogeneous resources. So that means that your hosts, your virtualization workers, they have the same access, the same type of configuration when it comes to these physical devices. So if you set it ATH0, then it remains ATH0 across these hosts in this cluster that are going to utilize this virtual network. So for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to proceed as the private host networking, because my traffic is going to stay on the same device. I don't need this traffic to travel outside. However, again, should you need to, that would be the way how to configure it. And also don't forget the custom name for the bridge. So you are going to have the bridge where all your virtual networks will connect. So the you're supposed to prepare the bridge either yourself or using any kind of automation. So if you'd like to make your life easier, then there is the OneDeploy tool that can deploy OpenNebula in a correct way and will take care about the bridges and will take care about the data stores. Other than that, as I mentioned, for the purpose of this demonstration, I will proceed with the private host networking. Now, then you have the address pool. And this one is quite important. So you cannot have a virtual network without the address range. So you must define the address range. Now, it might be the IP address range, where with IPv4, IPv6, or combined, or it may be just a simple Ethernet type of the range that's only going to assign MAC address, and it's not going to configure any IP address there. But at least one range must be defined, and it must contain at least the Ethernet type of a range. So it must at least give out hand out the MAC addresses to your virtual machines. Otherwise, you will not be able to deploy a virtual machine and place it to this network, as there are just simply no leases available. So in my case, I'm going to proceed with IPv4, and if you're following along, then also proceed with IPv4. So let's do 192.168.22. So that would be the first IP address to deal, and then let's add 40 as the size, which means that starting from this IP address, this range is going to have 40 addresses. Also, of course, this one's going to hand over the MAC addresses as well. So should you want a custom MAC address, then you also can type it right here. You can have multiple ranges configured, so that is entirely possible. Then just add another one and another one. So let's say if you need to configure one range consisting of, let's say, 80 IP addresses, and you cannot allocate 80 IP addresses from the get-go because there is in the middle, let's say 10 IP addresses are already being used by some networking equipment or by something that is there. So then you would need to create, let's say, a 40 network with a 40 IP addresses, then create a second one with 40 IP addresses, skipping these 10 in the middle. So that would be the way to go if you need to allocate more than, let's say, 40, and you know that there's something in the middle. Right. Then you go to security groups. If you're using security groups and if you're running the supported virtual network, then under the security groups, you can select these groups that you would like to be attached to this virtual network. Please note that security groups are uh, are restrictive by default. So if something is not allowed, then it is blocked. And then all your security groups are taken into the consideration. So the default security groups, the default one allows anything to go in and anything to go out. So which actually means that it makes no sense to mix the default security group with all of the other security groups. Quality of service for the inbound and the outbound traffic can be configured right here. And the last but not least, and very important part of any virtual network is the context section. That's where you supposed to place the gateway that's going to get to be configured on your virtual network, the DNS, and also if you'd like to change then the network address and the network mask. By default, that the mask could be 24, and gateway and DNS are going to get empty. But it's not it. There's one very, 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 very important field here, and that is the method. So that sets how OpenNebula should treat the virtual network card in this network. Should it configure it as static with the IP addresses from the range? Should it skip entirely and not configure it at all? Or should it set this into that dynamic mode so you can have the external DHCP that will hand over the IP addresses? So by default, so if it's not selected, then we are going to use static, which is based on the context, and that is going to take the IP addresses from this pool. So that if you're planning to use an external DHCP for that, that's where you can switch this method. And that's it. You click finish and your virtual network is created. And remember, I mentioned something about the reservations. Yes. So if you would like to split this network into smaller chunks, you can create a reservation. Just a single click, then select the range that you would like to reserve from, set the number of IP addresses that you would like to reserve from there, and the name. And that's it. So you get this reservation created. It's going to be a child network, so it's going to inherit all of the settings from its parent, in this case from the VNet 1. And VNet 1 is going to have these 10 IP addresses leased to this network with the ID of 2. So that means that if you're placing a virtual network card in the VNet 1, neither of these IP addresses will be provided to any of the VM. So the next one is going to have the 192.168.20.12. So these are completely reserved for this network. But be careful with these reservations and with the holding the IP, because you can actually hold the IP address if you don't want this to be handed over to a virtual machine for any reason, for example, .12, you can just hold it. And then this one is not going to be in that pool. Now, be very careful. The thing is that if your virtual network has at least one lease, it doesn't matter if you hold it, if you leased it to the reservation, or if it's actually assigned to a virtual machine, you are not going to be able to delete it, right? So you try to delete it, and you are going to receive an error that, we cannot delete the virtual network because it's being used. So keep that in mind, that since this is a child network, it takes these 10 IP addresses from the parent. So in the parent network, these are becoming the leased IP addresses. keep that in mind, especially when you're going to build some kind of automation. This is very helpful to always be aware of. Right. So these are the virtual networks. Then when you have your virtual network, you can update it via the update, or you can go to attributes and you will find all these attributes, all these configurations in the form of the attributes. So one thing that I would need to change, I would need to change the DNS. And probably if you're running it somewhere in the cloud the way that I do, then the rogue DNS servers are not, or DNS relays are not quite welcome there. So instead of using 172.16.101 as my DNS, I would just go with public 1.1.1.1.1. And that means that I'm not going to get my packages blocked. Otherwise, I may have some issues with the network communication. But as you saw, I could do the same thing by going to update, click next, go to context, and change it right here. Or I simply can just go and fix it by just editing these attributes, right? So whatever floats your boat, but I sometimes prefer this because it's much faster. Right. So virtual network is configured, and then we can look at the next thing. Because why we need this virtual network? We need the virtual network to connect our virtual machines, either to be able to talk to each other or to be able to search something, or so we can connect that. But where we can get a virtual machine from, right? So the virtual machine image is basically uh, consists of the virtual machine image, the disk snapshot, and the virtual machine template that is going to define how your future VM will look like. So what are the settings, what are the virtual networks, and so on and so forth. Now, all that can be downloaded from the marketplace, and we call them apps. So, but initially that is that's the virtual machine image with the virtual machine template. Now, marketplace would be the source of these pre-built images, means that these are ready to run on the OpenNebula environment. You see, the thing with OpenNebula images, what makes an image the OpenNebula image? There would be a tiny layer of the contextualization packages, and these contextualization packages helping this virtual machine to be managed by OpenNebula, configure these, let's say, virtual network settings on the network card without you needed to log into the console of this VM and do it with your hands, right? So that happens thanks to these contextualization packages. So you can build it yourself and you can install contextualization packages yourself. It's totally fine. But there is also a way how you can make your life easier and just go with the pre-built images that are ready to run on the OpenNebula environment. So pretty much plug and play approach. So this comes from the marketplace. Marketplaces can be public, can be private, and also we have the official marketplace, but also we're having the community marketplace. So apps, you can find them under the storage. If you go to marketplace, you can list all your currently available marketplace. Some of these marketplaces are enabled, some of these are disabled. We see that by default, OpenNebula Public is enabled, and that's what I'm going to use. Now, the list of images that are available to download can be found under the apps section. So it has images, it has separate virtual machine templates. It may also have the service templates. So services, just a side note, it's the multi-VM deployment that is kind of managed as a single entity and can be scaled up and down and deployed as a batch and then destroyed altogether. So all that can be found in the marketplace. So let me look for something like Ubuntu 24, and in the search, I found a few Ubuntu 24.04 images. So as I mentioned, that is the pretty much a vanilla OS with the contextualization package. So it comes empty, and all the software that you may need there, like I know Nginx, MariaDB, MySQL, PostgreSQL, whatever your case may be, you would need to install it yourself. Luckily, you can take an image, you can install all the necessary software or tweak it the way you wish, and then store the running virtual machine as a custom image, and then deploy all your future virtual machines from that image. So again, if you need to, you can modify it and make it fully yours. Now you need to press this cloud icon if you would like to import that image onto your OpenNebula environment, but also you can download it on your computer. So the image itself that will be downloaded can be uploaded to any other OpenNebula environment from your laptop or using the dedicated URL if you wish. But again, the easiest way, and we are going the easiest way today, you just download directly from the marketplace and you download it directly to the OpenNebula environment. Just press this button. Now, in this screen, you can have two things. You have the name and VM template. So this name is the name of an image. So when you download the image, you are placing it as the image there, and it's going to have a name. So by default, the name is Ubuntu 24.04, and we are going to proceed with this one. Now, as I mentioned before, you also need a virtual machine template. So in OpenNebula, we are never deploying virtual machines from an image. We are deploying virtual machines from the VM template. Because your virtual machine may have multiple images. What is an image? Image is a snapshot of a disk. It can contain the bootable operating system. It may contain just some, data that you need to work with. It may be just empty, right? So image can be all of these, and obviously image also can be the disk that you like, the ISO and so on. All that is treated as an image. Now, that's why you need the virtual machine template that describes what are the images that you're going to use, where they're supposed to be mounted, what is your virtual network card configuration, and also what are the resources that this virtual machine will be deployed with, the memory, the CPU, and all that kind of stuff. So the good thing is that the templates the images that are coming from the marketplace, they have the virtual template bundled, and you can export it along with an image. And I would really recommend you to do that. Why? Well, because it doesn't take much of space, so it's just a bunch of text, to be honest. Secondly, because it is a working template. You just need to do next, finish, and that's it. So in case you're creating your own virtual machine template, you can use this as a reference. Let's say you can clone it as the example and tweak it so it suits your needs as well, right? So that's why I really prefer to always export the virtual machine template as well. And then you need to place it onto the data store. OpenNebula has 3 data store types. There is a system data store where you have your running virtual machines. Then there is the image data store, that's where you have your images while they're at rest. And then the third one is the files data store, so data store for plain text files. I don't know, whatever, scripts, PDFs, whatever you wish. So your image, whenever you download it directly from the marketplace, or you using command line to upload that, or using the Sunstone and your computer to upload an image, it must end up on the image data store. Since we are running the pretty much empty OpenNebula environment, then the uh, image data store that we have is the only one, and that is the default image data store. Please also note that all these data stores, they can be both the local to the hypervisor or shared, and so on and so forth. So you can use the data stores on the network or the directly attached ones. Okay, so click finish. You have this right here. You have a pop-up with the image ID and the virtual machine template ID up there. So the template is already there. It's because it's a bunch of text, as I mentioned before. While image may be there, may not be there, depends on the size of an image and the network that you have. So if you have a very fast network and the image is lightweight, then it's going to get there very soon. In case the image is heavy and full of data, let's say 30 to 40 gigs, then it may take some time in order for image to become ready. Once an image is ready, it is actually ready to be used, right? Because that's when you can start deploy your virtual machines. And as I mentioned before, this is a pretty much plug and play. So you just select, press instantiate button, and that's it. Next, finish, virtual machine deployed. So nothing needs to be altered if you just simply wish to deploy a virtual machine. Now, the virtual machine template is something that you will work a lot with. So that's what describes how your virtual machine will look like. It has a set of images because your virtual machine may have the bootable OS separated from the data drive. So that's already two images. And then you have the multi-VM deployments, the services, and these services are going to rely on these virtual machine templates. So virtual machine templates are very, very, very important piece of that puzzle. Right. So you take and you can update that virtual machine template. So let's select the Ubuntu 2404 and let's press the update button. So that's where you need to select what the hypervisor type is running. So it runs KVM in my case, and that's where you can tweak the memory. That's where you can set the different memory modifications and the way how you can resize it. That's where you can dedicate the physical and virtual CPU resources, as well as selecting the cost. So if you'd like to calculate in the end of the month how much a certain user owes you in the monetary value, then that's where you can set the price to run this virtual machine with the resources. Now, please note, while you can configure a lot of these settings, not every setting can be adjusted by the user when user deploys this virtual machine. However, some settings are there. So let's say you can a user by default will be able to, let's say, put it in a different network or resize the hard drive and so on and so forth. Right. So I will just increase the memory for this virtual network template for the Ubuntu, let it be 2404 with 2 gigs of memory. Then you proceed to advanced options, and that's where like the whole world opens up. So first of all, you can attach other disks. By default, this virtual machine template only comes with the plain Ubuntu 2404, nothing more and nothing less. You can attach another disk there. For example, that could be a data disk or just empty disk that you will use as the data drive. Then my Ubuntu 2404 actually is configured to be tiny, as pretty much any image, to be fair, in our marketplace. So these are configured to be only like 4, 10 gigs, and if we are speaking of Alpine, even less. Now, it might not be the case you wish when it comes to deployment. So you can resize. While the initial image, let it be 4 gigs, you may resize and make it bigger on the deployment. So you just need to press edit, go there, and let's say make it, I know, 20 gigs, right? So that means that initial image is like configured to be 4 gigs, even though in reality it might be even lower. But when it instantiates, your system partition will have 20 gigs of disk space. Obviously, not fully allocated from the get-go, so it will be gradually growing. And once you deploy it, you also can resize it, so you can make it even larger should you need to. But yeah, I would play it safe and I would add a bit of more disk space for starters. Then under the networks, that's where you're attaching the network card, and that's where you picking up where to place it. So I will place it to my default network, and you can add as many network cards as you need. So you can make a bunch of these. But let's say if you would like to have 2 IP addresses from the same network, instead of adding 2 network cards, you can use 1 network card and just add an alias. So you can create an alias and place it in the same network. So then your virtual network card will be configured with 2 IP addresses. I would say very convenient. So operating system and CPU stuff placed right here. That's where you can select the boot order, and that's where you can select different CPU models that you would like all the virtual machines coming from this virtual machine template to be on. Then PCI device pass through. So if you have any PCI devices like GPUs, that's where you configure the pass through for the PCI device. And another thing that I would like to mention in the scope of this demonstration is the context section. So context section is the way how you can shape your deployed virtual machine with some additional parameters. Because as I mentioned, it comes vanilla. The host name would be localhost, right? The settings of the time zones going to be UTC and so on and so forth. You may want it to be something else. And obviously, you can configure it by directly connecting to your virtual machine, or you can leverage some of the contextualization perks we have. So first thing first, you can write down the start script. So the start script will be executed every time a virtual machine is in the process of booting, which means deployment, reboot, and so on and so forth. So what it can be, well, you can just echo, let's say, date to the root date dot time. So something like that. Then also the user inputs. You see, you can ask your user when the user deploys a virtual machine out of this template to supply with some specific environment variables. This may include the time zone that later you are going to use to set the time zone, or it may be a password that later you are going to use to set a password for the root admin user, for example, or it also may be something else. So these are the prompts that are configured under the user inputs, right? Then also these context custom variables. So the context custom variables is anything else that you would like to pass in the form of the environment variable to your virtual machine. And while you can pass anything, whatever you wish, like for example, hello world, and set it to true, there is also that's also the place where you can configure some of the built-in automation. As the example, let's set the time zone. So time zone, and then the time zone can be set to Europe, Riga. That's where I'm located. So I would like uh, this to be in the uh, Europe, Riga time zone. Then also what I can have is the host name. So I can use the set host name attribute to signal the contextualization package that I would like to set my attribute to set my host name to something custom and not the local host. So as the example, I can use, let's say, Ubuntu dash, and then what also you can leverage some of the user or template specific variables. As the example, let's do uname. That's going to stand for the username. So if I'm going to deploy this virtual machine from this template, then it's supposed to have the Ubuntu dash one admin as the name, as the host name. And last but not least, I also would like to set the password to OpenNebula. By default, password is not set, so out of the box, I won't be able to use the VNC and open the terminal window of that virtual machine. However, if I will set a password to something, I will be able to log in as root. And there is much more. So for the list of all possible variables that you can leverage, plus how to use various template variables plus user variables, I would like to refer you to our documentation. So there is like quite a handy manual on that. Right. And then that's it. So my template was updated and it is ready to be deployed. The same way as the built-in Alpine Linux 3.20 also is ready to be deployed. How to deploy it? Few options, right? So your virtual machines can be deployed as a single virtual machine or in batches. So you can deploy a virtual machine and then set the value to 10 and it deploys 10 virtual machines. Just make sure you have enough resources, right? Your virtual machines can be accessed from the Sunstone via the VNC, or you can access them using the secure shell if you are in the routable subnet. And these virtual machines can be backed up or turned into an image, right? So if you are running QEMU software virtualization, then please proceed with Alpine Linux. I'm running KVM, so my local host is KVM, so I will proceed with Ubuntu. So I'm going to press play button, as I like to refer to it, but actually instantiate button, and then I will set that I would like to deploy 2 virtual machines. So I don't want to make any alterations here. And again, I don't want to make any alterations here as well. So as the template defined, that would be the way I wish it to be once deployed. Okay, click finish. And here we go. So the specific process scheduler is going to evaluate and will place the virtual machine on a host. Well, in my case, I have only one host, so all my virtual machines will end up on the same host. So we just need to wait for a bit. And if I still have some space on the host, and I do have some space on a host when it comes to CPU and when it comes to memory, I also can deploy a bunch of more lightweight virtual machines. As I said, you can instantiate a virtual machine from the template, but you also can instantiate virtual machine from the VM uh, VM view. So just press plus, click the template you would like to instantiate. Let's say I also would like to have 2 of these, and then the virtual machine name. So you can leave it empty, and then it's going to take the name of the virtual machine template, plus it's going to append the ID, or you may set something custom, like for example, Alpine. And you also can leverage the percentage IDX, and then it is going to take a specific ID of this batch and will attach it, will add it, append it to the virtual machine name. Quite handy, right? And same right here. I would like to keep it as it is on these default settings. So now I have 4 virtual machines almost deployed, 2 of them already running, two of these machines are still in the process of being deployed. Now it's going to take a while to deploy them, and what I already can have is the VNC. So I can click the VNC button and navigate directly to the VNC console of that virtual machine. So I can log in as root, and the password is OpenNebula because that's what I configured in the first place. And as you can see, I'm in. What else you can find actually is that the host name is set to Ubuntu-1 admin instead of just being localhost. And let's do date. Date is there, so it's Eastern European Summer Time Zone. So that is the time zone that I'm currently located. Let's look inside of the root directory, and we have the file date.time. So if we are going to cat this file, we are going to receive the date of that, presumably when the action was executed. So that was the start script that kicked in and was executed when we deployed the VM. So if I'm going to reboot the VM, then this virtual machine, then I will have a new record in that file. Sometimes you may forget, let's say, the password, or password was just simply not set, or you need to change any of this. Let's say I don't want this Ubuntu 2404-1 to execute this script, or you need to change your key, public key. So you can do it even if your virtual machine is running. You go to configurations, update VM configuration, go to the context section, and you can change, append, or amend the public key. You can remove the start script if you need to, and you can change the variables. For example, the same password can be edited, and instead of being OpenNebula, I can set it to Ubuntu 2404. And this will, so these changes are going to trigger the update of the contextualization, and you will be able to connect to the VNC with this new password. So again, if you forgot something, no worries, you can configure it later. So no need to redeploy a virtual machine. And last but not least, what I would like to show you is that you can save and take snapshots and resize each individual disk of that VM. Now, if you take a snapshot, it is going to take a snapshot, but you cannot revert this snapshot of a disk while your virtual machine is running. So if you'd like to revert the snapshot of a disk, what you need to do, you need to power off the VM and then revert the disk to a snapshot. I mean, that would be a safety feature, right? Because you don't want to to mess up with the disks while something is using that disk. Or alternatively, you can save this as your custom Ubuntu 2404 image and then change it in the template so you deploy your custom virtual machine with your custom settings instead of having the vanilla one. And should you need to take a snapshot of the whole virtual machine, you go to snapshots, click take snapshot, and then this is going to take a snapshot of all the disks and the memory of the virtual machine. While you have these virtual machines running, you can clean up the environment by terminating them if they are in the correct state. All right, so your virtual machines should be, let's say, all running. So you cannot terminate a virtual machine that's currently in the process of taking a snapshot. But once it's there, you can select them all and terminate. And that is going to destroy your virtual machines. You also can obviously reboot, suspend, and migrate your virtual machines from this interface. And that would be it for today's demonstration. So any questions regarding to what was covered in this demonstration, I'll be very happy to answer. Don't forget that we are running a lot of other webinars, not only training webinars, but also the sneak a peek on the newer functionality of OpenNebula for the upcoming versions. Then also we have a lot of use cases. So stay tuned and follow us on our webinars page. Yeah, we have a question. So are you running? Yes, I'm running everything on the same host. So my demonstration is pretty much all in one, which is not the typical environment, obviously, but for easier to manage and easier to use during the demonstration, yes, it's all in one. And I've deployed that using the Mini One tool that you can also get. However, I mean, the best way is going to be one deploy. So that is a set of, it's an Ansible collection that can help you to deploy the OpenNebula environment at scale. So not only one server, but across all your environment. Don't forget that we also have the OpenNebula Academy. So should you like to be trained on OpenNebula, feel free to sign up for that. And also join the community. We have forum. We have a lot of cool stuff. So don't forget about our community pages. All right. So if we don't have any other questions, then thanks for attending. It was a pleasure to give this webinar to you. And please join our next webinars.